Hello everyone, I hope you're there. Sorry, I have technical difficulties today. I still cannot share my screen, but I decided to go live anyway, so we can have a little bit to study before Shavuot. I think it is important, so we can take some time to study what's beginning tonight. So let's try to do it together. I'm gonna give it one more minute for people to realize that we are live. Hopefully we are going to have you all here. And I know, let's see. Want to be sure that everything is working. Okay. So I hope you guys are there. If you do, please feel free to use the chat. I hope you can hear me. Use the chat on Facebook or YouTube so we can study together and I can answer your questions. But first, let me see. Okay, so tonight we are going to start the holiday of the festival of Shavuot. Is biblical. It's kind of coming from the Torah, because even though it's mentioned in the Torah, the way we celebrate Shavuot in these days, it's very different what the way is described in the Torah. But Shavuot also is interesting, and it's kind of different from other holidays because the Torah doesn't give us an exact date to when we should celebrate Shavuot. It's giving in a cryptic way, and is connected to Pesach. At least that's the understanding that the rabbis have. So, because the Torah says in the book of Leviticus, and again, I want to read from my screen because I cannot share it with you. In the book of Leviticus, chapter 23, it says, "You shall count for yourselves from the day after Shabbat." And remember that word because it's a little controversial of what that Shabbat there means. Okay, so let me go again. "You shall count for yourself from the day after Shabbat, from the day when you bring the Omer of the waving, 7 weeks. They should be complete. Until the day after the 7th week, you shall count 50 days, and you shall offer a new meal offering of 2 loaves to God. From your dwelling places you shall bring bread that shall be waved, 2 loaves made of 2/10 ephah. They shall be fine flour. They shall be baked leavened." Okay? So, what it says here is that we have some kind of 50 days period that we should count from the day after that mysterious Shabbat mentioned in the book of Leviticus. And after that 50 days period, we should bring to the temple an offering that is going to be bread made out of wheat. Why is this so important? Because basically it says that the day after Shabbat we have to bring to the temple flour, and this is barley flour. That's what we call the Omer, was this offering of barley in the shape of flour. And then 50 days later we come back to the temple, but instead of bringing barley flour, we have to bring loaves of bread made out of wheat. That moment when the Torah says in the book of Leviticus that we have to bring the loaves of bread made out of wheat, that's what is called as Shavuot. In fact, we call it Shavuot because Shavuot means weeks, because we have to count 7 weeks, and after the 7 weeks, we have this special ceremony in the temple. So what we do in these days is we count this period that started with the offering of the Omer. So every day we count it. There is a ceremony that if you come to synagogue, there is a blessing that we say, and then we announce which day of the week is. And because of the book of Leviticus said that we have to count 7 weeks, but it also says that we have to count the days, so that we have to count 50 days. The way we announce every day of the Omer is both in days and weeks. For example, day 1 of the Omer, we are going to say day 1. But then the day 8, we are going to say is 8 days, which equals 7 days, 1 week and 1 day. So we do it both. So we don't bring the barley anymore. We don't bring the bread anymore. What we do in these days on Shavuot is we celebrate the giving of the Torah. But the Torah itself doesn't say anything about it. We're going to study about that in a minute. But for now, let me go back to the beginning of the verse, where it said that we have to start counting this the day after Shabbat. Which Shabbat? It's not clear. If you take the word Shabbat literally, it seems to imply that we have to start counting the days the day after the first Shabbat after Pesach. And when I say Pesach, in biblical times, Pesach was only the first day. It's what we call in this day the first Seder. That was the Pesach. Because Pesach was nothing but a sacrifice in the temple to remember the Exodus from Egypt. In fact, that's exactly what the Israelites did in Egypt before they left, right? They had to sacrifice this lamb and they had to eat it. And that was the Korban Pesach, the sacrifice for Passover. And I said, whoa, don't we celebrate Pesach for 1 week? Yes and no. Because even though technically only the first day is Pesach, if you go back to the Bible, you will see that the rest of the week is referred as Chag HaMatzot, the festival of the matzah. So since we don't have a temple anymore and we don't have the offering and the most important, long story short, the rabbis decided to combine both. And in these days, we just call Pesach to the entire week, but technically, Pesach is only the first day. The rest is Chag HaMatzot. Today it's like a synonym. You can say either Pesach or Chag HaMatzot, and people will understand what you're talking about. But again, we are reading here from the book of Leviticus, where it said the day after the Shabbat. It seems to imply that is the first Shabbat after the first day of Pesach. And then after that Shabbat, you should start counting 50 days. And after those 50 days, you celebrate Shavuot. Now, the issue is, if you take that word Shabbat literally, it's very difficult to calculate when Shavuot is going to be in advance. Because Pesach is always on a fixed date. But the first Shabbat after Pesach is not. So we don't know how many days after the first day of Pesach is going to be that Shabbat. And then that is going to change when Shavuot is going to be. So the rabbis decided to make a very interesting translation of the word Shabbat. They took the word Shabbat not as literal, not as the literal Shabbat that we celebrate at the end of the week, but Shabbat as day of rest. Because that's what technically the word Shabbat means, is day of rest. So they said Pesach is also a day of rest. So what the Torah seems to imply here is that we have to start counting the Omer, not after the first literal Shabbat, after the first day of Pesach, but after the first day of Pesach, which is also a Shabbat, because it's also a day of rest. And that's the way we count it. What is the advantage of taking that meaning of the word Shabbat in that verse, that also Shavuot will be always on a fixed date, because it will be always 50 days after Pesach, which we already know when it is. And that's the way we celebrate it in these days. This was a huge controversy with the Karaites. Remember, we talked about that in previous classes. This group which is kind of a sect within Judaism, that they don't believe in the oral law. They don't use the Talmud as the source of law. They use exclusively the words of the Bible, the words of the Tanakh. And they do take the word Shabbat literally. So they don't care that they can never calculate in advance when Shavuot is going to be, because they believe that that's the way it was intended. Now, yeah, you can argue in these days, yes, you can actually know exactly when Shavuot is going to be, because the calendar is mathematical. But back in the day, even when the Karaite had this controversy with the Rabbanites, they didn't have a mathematical calendar the way we have it in these days. So it was still complicated, but they didn't care because they believed that that was the will of God. But for practical terms, for us, for ourselves, for this generation, we take the words of the rabbis and we start the counting of the Omer the day after Pesach. Okay, so the first night that we count the Omer is during the second Seder, which is at the end of the day, the first day of Pesach, because it said the day after that day. Okay, now this counting of the Omer seems to imply some kind of progression. Remember, on Pesach, when we started counting, the Torah says we have to bring flour. And then on Shavuot, we have to bring bread, which is something more sophisticated, more beautiful, and more delicious. Flour itself is inedible. You can't eat flour. Don't try. You can't. You're going to choke, right? And especially because it's barley flour. Then barley is something that used to be used to feed animals. But then on Shavuot, we have to bring loaves of bread made of wheat, which is absolutely human food. So there is something very interesting here that the rabbis are suggesting, that this period from Pesach to Shavuot should be a period of growth. The same way that we start with animal food and we finish with human food, we have to take these 50 days to elevate ourselves from an animal level to a human level. And that's the beauty of the counting of the Omer. That's why it's so important to count every day. We finished that period last night. I don't know if you've been counting. I've been counting every day. This is something that it gives me great pleasure year after year. I have this little app on my phone that reminds me every day that I have to count, and I read a little meditation or a little teaching every day of the counting to make use of this opportunity that we have to prepare ourselves for Shavuot. Now, why is so important to prepare ourselves for Shavuot? Because the rabbis say that Shavuot is the anniversary of the giving of the Torah. And that's why it's so important. We can't just go and receive the Torah just like that. You have to prepare yourself to receive the Torah. You have to purify your heart to receive the Torah. Then, of course, you may ask, well, but isn't that the Torah supposed to be given for? So the Torah will be the one helping us to perfect ourselves, to purify our heart, and so forth? Well, the answer is no. The Torah was given to us to take us to the next level, but we have to do our homework before we reach that moment when we are ready to enrich ourselves with the words of Torah. That's exactly what happened to the Israelites in the desert. According to the rabbis, it took them 50 days from Egypt to Sinai to receive the Torah. And they used every one of those days to purify themselves, to elevate themselves from the lowest status of slaves, without any understanding, without any freedom, to prepare themselves to be ready to receive the Torah. Now, this is what happened, and I see this all the time, and it's not just in Judaism, but in every religion. I believe people should perfect or purify their hearts before they even open their holy books. Because we all know what happened. If you open a holy book and you study a holy book and you become a scholar of a holy book with an evil heart, you know what is going to happen? You're going to use that holy book that's supposed to be there to make the world better, to justify your evil. And we see that all the time, that people will take the words from their books and they will distort them to justify their evil. And that's why I believe it's so important, and this is with the period of the Omer is hinting us that we have to do our homework to become mensch, to become righteous people, become good people before we are even ready to start studying Torah. So I hope you did that exercise to grow a little bit every day from Pesach to Shavuot, to be ready tonight to receive the Torah. Now, but let's see, this is all rabbinical. Remember I told you this giving of the Torah. But what does the Torah actually say that happened on Shavuot? Let's see. Let's start with the book of Exodus. Book of Exodus will talk about the different holidays, and specifically for Shavuot, you will say there is a holiday of harvest. So again, something that it doesn't relate to us anymore. We are not farmers, at least most of us. And even if we are not in the land of Israel, at least most of us. And according to the Torah, that was the festival of Shavuot, was a festival of harvest, when people will take also the first fruits of their crops, and they will bring it to the temple as an offering. Not just the breads, the loaves of bread that we mentioned before, but also their first fruits, what they say, the bikurim, and they are going to. That's what it is. But again, nothing about the giving of the Torah. So, it's a very interesting concept. Very interesting concept. Yes, René. I'm in a class.
Mama's here.
Okay, great. Okay, yeah, that was my son. He likes to come say hi once in a while. Okay, so let's continue with this. So what is Shavuot? We know that in these days it doesn't reflect the harvest anymore. But we do have sometimes, I don't know, I haven't seen it much in Winnipeg, but where I grew up, we used to have this kind of celebration of the bikurim, of the first fruit. Would be a time to bring food, to donate to places like Winnipeg Harvest, etc. And this, I guess in Winnipeg, the tradition is to do it more for Yom Kippur, where we fast. So at that moment, we remember other people that they are struggling to put food on their tables during the year. But in some places, they replace the biblical concept of the first fruit with donating food to food banks. So you can still, I guess, do that if you want to celebrate Shavuot in another way. But again, the rabbis say that the main meaning of Shavuot is the anniversary of the giving of the Torah. That was the time where the Israelites were on Sinai, and God spoke to them, and they heard the words of God, and they say, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear. In other words, when they verbally accepted the commandments. Let me see the rabbinic understanding of Shavuot. For example, I read here a comment that Shavuot is a very holy festival, when God sanctified us with His Torah and mitzvot, and selected us from amongst the nations to be His treasured nation. If not for this day, we would have been like Sodom and Gomorrah, and the heavens and the earth will not have been able to exist. Thus, it is appropriate to rejoice on these days. It is impossible not to rejoice, because the Torah and the mitzvot are better for us than all the good things of this world and the entire life of the world to come. Beautiful. Beautiful understanding at what Shavuot is. And again, and the rabbis say that this is the time when we say the famous phrase, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do, we will hear. And that is in Exodus 24:7. Now, the Mechilta, which is a midrash, presents a very interesting story on how we ended up accepting the Torah. Maybe you heard this one before. I want to read it. Again, this is from the Mechilta. And it says that God actually went to all the nations of the earth, offering them the Torah. And they all rejected the Torah from one way or another. And it says this: God revealed himself to the children of the wicked Esau. Remember Esau, Jacob's brother? And asked them, will you accept the Torah? Actually, you know what? Let me do it again. Let me do it in a godly voice. So basically, God went to the children of wicked Esau and asked them, will you accept the Torah? And they asked, what does it say? And God replied, it says, you shall not murder. They say to God, murder is the legacy we received from our forefather Esau. As the verse states, you shall live by your sword. So God appeared to the children of Ammon and Moab, the descendants of Lot, and said to them, will you accept the Torah? And they asked, what does it say? And God said, you shall not commit adultery. They said to God, we are all the products of adulterous relationships. As the verse states, the two daughters of Lot became pregnant by their father. How can we accept it? So God approached to the children of Ishmael and said to them, will you accept the Torah? And they say to him, what does it say? And God said, you shall not steal. And they say to God, well, that was the blessing with which our forefather was blessed. And it says, he will be a wild man. It also said, for I have stolen. Finally, God came to the Jewish people. From his right hand, he presented the fiery Torah to them. And before God said anything, they said, everything that God has said, we will do and we will hear. Have you ever heard that one before? That story from the Midrash? Actually, there is a famous joke about it, that finally when God comes to the Jewish people, they said, even before God presented them with the Ten Commandments, with the tablets, they said, will you accept it? And they said, okay, how much does it cost? And God said, nothing, it's free. So they said, okay, gave us two. And that's why we have the two tablets of the law. That was the joke that I heard once before, and it's based on this midrash from the Mechilta that I just read. Very, very interesting. Where sometimes we can actually find the origin of certain jokes, and this is coming from the midrash. Now, the interesting thing with the midrash, it seems to imply that we were not the first choice from God to present the Torah. That God had other people in mind, but they all rejected it. And the nice things that we did, the great thing that we did, was to accept it. We were willing to accept it without preconditions. And that's why we got the Torah. But at the same time, it's also talking about the predisposition of the Jewish people to accept something that they knew it was going to go against their natural instincts. Because that's the thing. Most of the time, we are not willing to accept anything that is going to challenge our lifestyles, our natural instincts. In other words, we feel we are fine the way we are. So please don't tell me I have to do anything What do you mean I have to change my diet? No, I won't do that. That's the way I live my life. What do you mean I have to pray 3 times a day? That is inconvenient. I have other things to do. So this midrash, what it's saying is the great thing that that generation did was to accept something that it was challenging their lifestyle, because they understood that it was for their best interest. Because sometimes that's exactly what we have to do. If we want to grow, if we want to improve, if we want to become better, sometimes we have to make some lifestyle adjustments. That's what happens when people want to go on a diet or start exercising because they want to feel better. When it will take lots of sacrifices, and there are certain changes that you will have to do. But you know that at the end of the day, it's for your own good. And that's what the Midrash is saying. That it is important sometimes when you engage in the study of Torah, it's important for you to know that your lifestyle is going to be challenged. Your beliefs are going to be challenged, and that's okay. That's okay to give yourself the opportunity, at least, to learn something new that will have the potential to transform your life. Dudy Foyer is here, great cantor. He's in Florida in these days, and he has something very interesting. Let me put it here. He said, we are comfortable with the way we are comfortable. Of course we are, but that's okay. Sometimes we don't know any better. And the thing that sometimes surprised me the most is how people will try pretty much everything out there to improve their lives except Judaism. I'm talking about Jewish people, of course. They will go to every other guru out there, and they will accept their words as great words of advice, but then why don't you try the Jewish way? And you will be surprised of how much wisdom and how much positive messages you will find there. So give yourself the opportunity, if you feel that there is something missing in your life, to try the Jewish way. To me, it's mind-blowing. How sometimes we will try everything. If you will see people reading every single kind of self-help books and stuff like that, but they won't open the Torah because they believe there is nothing there that they can improve their lives. And I think they are very wrong about that. Very wrong. Let's continue a little bit more with Shavuot, something that is very interesting. And it is, I mentioned before that there is no mentioning in the Torah that Shavuot is the moment where the Torah was giving. But it is not kind of crazy to put the two together. If you calculate how many days they were in between the Exodus from Egypt to the time where they received the Torah from Sinai, you can kind of make it fit with the holiday of Shavuot. So it's not something that is really stretched and really crazy and really out of context. It is quite possible. And also the rabbis explain that the Torah purposely does not present a specific date for the giving of the Torah, because this is something at the end of the day you have to accept every day of the year. It's not that the Torah was giving one specific date. The Torah is giving to us every day. And we have the opportunity to accept Torah every day of the year. It's the same way that we don't have to wait until Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur to do Teshuvah and to repent and to change our behavior. We have to engage into that every day of the year. So the same thing, the Torah was giving to us without any specific date mentioned in the Torah, as a reminder that we have the opportunity to study it every day. And also the rabbis explain that the Torah was given in the desert. That is basically an open space, as a reminder that is there for everybody who would like to embrace Torah. You don't have to be a Jew to study Torah. In fact, the Torah is one of the greatest gifts to humanity. So everybody's invited to study Torah. And that's why, at least at Shari Zedek, we have people coming to our classes to study Torah that they are Jews and Jewish and non-Jewish. Doesn't really matter. Torah is available for everyone who wants to study and to learn those words of wisdom to improve their lives. Now, there is something else that we have to talk about Shavuot, and it's important to remember because if you've been following our posts, you will know that tonight we are going to have a pre-Tikkun Rabbi's panel. Everybody knows what a Rabbi's panel is, but I'm wondering how many of you know what the Tikkun is. Well, the Tikkun Leil Shavuot is a very old tradition to stay awake, to remain awake all the first night of Shavuot studying Torah. It's a fantastic experience. If you've never done that, I highly recommend to do it. So basically, all you do is to stay awake, study Torah, drink coffee, and eat cheesecake. That's what most people do. But by the way, that's one of the traditions of Shavuot, as we eat dairy products, and there are very different interpretations of why we do that. But we stay awake all night studying Torah. Where is that coming from? Well, the first hint is the word tikkun, which comes from the word, the Hebrew word for correction. Correction. So what are we correcting the first night of Shavuot that we have to call it the tikkun? Well, we have to go back to the Midrash to understand that. Okay? And it says that, I'm going to read here from this, it's called Pirkei the Rabbi Eliezer. And this is a Midrashic work that is coming from somewhere from between the 7th to the 10th century, and it was written in Israel. And this Midrash says as following. It says, Moses went to the camp of the Israelites and awakened them from their slumber, saying, Wake up, for the groom has arrived and desires to bring the bride under the marriage canopy. He's waiting for her in order to give them the Torah. The bridesman came and brought the bride out, just as the Lord does for his friends For the verse states, Moses took the people out of the camp to greet the Lord. And that is from the book of Exodus. So the groom also came out to greet the bride and to give them the Torah. As the verse states, Lord, you went before your people. Now, this is Chag Sameach, Dudi. Good to see you here. So, this is interesting. According to this Midrash, this verse from the book of Exodus that says that Moses took the people out of the camp to greet the Lord is a hint that Moses had to wake them up to go and receive the Torah. Because it looks like they fell asleep. And that sometimes is a natural reaction when we are trying to avoid something. It's almost like putting a parking ticket in a drawer, closing the drawer and forgetting about it. Or you have a responsibility and you don't want to take that responsibility, so you purposely oversleep. So this is what happened. They kind of accepted the Torah and they said to God, yes, we're going to do it, blah, blah, blah. But when God came to actually give them the Torah, they overslept. They missed the appointment. They weren't there. So Moses has to go to the camp, wake them up, and take them out of their tents to go and receive the Torah. And that's why the rabbis say that the Torah says Moses took the people out of the camp to greet the Lord. It's almost saying, hey, where are you? Wake up. Come with me. Hurry up. God is there ready to give the Torah and you are not there. So that's what we are correcting now. That generation missed the mark because they missed the appointment. So what we do, because we don't know when in the middle of the night the Torah was revealed, we stay up the whole night studying Torah to rectify their mistake of that generation. So the other thing that this Midrash is implying is that the moment where God gave the Torah to the people of Israel was a moment where we kind of got married to God, and the Torah itself was the ketuvah, was the marriage contract, because that's what the ketuvah is. It's a legal document that it establishes rights and obligations. So this is exactly what the Torah is. It's a document that it will establish rights and obligations for both us and God. In the Jewish wedding, the groom is the one giving the ketuvah to the bride. So in this Midrash is saying that God represents the groom, giving us this document because we are the bride, and the bride usually is the one who gets to keep the ketuvah, so we get to keep the Torah as a reminder of our obligations to God, but also as a reminder of all the beauties of this marriage with God, all the blessing that comes attached to it. So this is what is so wonderful about the moment. And there are actually many ceremonies, and I've seen it performed at the Sheri Zedek, where at midnight there is a ceremony under a chuppah, where we symbolically receive the Torah as a marriage document, and we symbolically get married to God. So it's also a very interesting thing. So based on that midrash that I read to you from the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, the Kabbalah, mystic Judaism, took the concept and they created the Tikkun. So let me read here. This is a commentary to the Shulchan Aruch called Magen Avraham, and it says, in the Zohar, it states that the pious one of ancient times will remain awake the entire night, occupied in Torah study. Most of the students today follow this custom. The straightforward explanation may be that the people of Israel at Mount Sinai slept that entire night and God has to awaken them. Therefore, we must rectify that, exactly what I was telling you before. Now, technically, the Tikkun is a book that is published, that you can actually buy it online. We'll have excerpts of different parts of the Torah, and you technically will have enough time during the night to study all that. So you are studying the entire Torah the entire night. That's one option. So what some people do during this Tikkun Leil Shavuot that happens the first night of Shavuot. But the most common ways in these days is to have different rabbis or professors or scholars to prepare classes. So basically you can attend all these sessions for the entire night, which is kind of difficult in these days of a pandemic, where we're planning to do something like that at Temple Shalom, but unfortunately, because we cannot get together, it was canceled. And all we have in this year will be a rabbi's panel before the beginning of Chag, before the beginning of Shavuot, and after that, each one will have the opportunity to attend whatever online tikkun they would like to attend if they feel comfortable connecting or using the computer during the Chag, during the holiday. So that will be, there are many options available from different synagogues around the world that they will offer these sessions all night long. So feel free to research for that and to attend if you want to study Torah during that night. So basically, that is Shavuot in a nutshell. And if you have any questions, I would like to hear it now. So we'll take a few minutes to answer the questions before we can finish today's class. Any questions? Feel free to use the chat. Okay. So if we have no questions, that's great. So I would like to wish you all Chag Sameach. Oh, and remember, on Sunday, May 31st at 7 p.m., we also have a cantorial concert. It's going to be streamed through the Sheri Zedek channels on YouTube and Facebook. You can watch it from there, 7 p.m. Central Time. And again, tonight at 5 p.m., the Rabbi's panel is going to be streamed on this same channel. So if you have an opportunity, please connect, and the chat will be open and you can ask questions to the rabbis. They will have a time to answer your questions at the end of their presentation. They're going to talk about wisdom, Jewish wisdom, and in these days of the pandemic. I think it's very relevant, very interesting. Okay, so thank you so much for watching. Please give us a thumbs up for this video. Subscribe to our channels if you want to receive notifications whenever we go live. We are getting great pleasure for putting all this online content for you so we can enrich your lives through study. Thank you very much. Chag Sameach. Stay safe. Hope to see you soon. Bye for now.